a member of the humanities content team here at Hawks, specifically in psychology, but the humanities team is working in disciplines of English and economics as well right now. And like you said before, I came to Hawks. I spent 15 years in the classroom. I was lucky enough for my experience to kind of run the gamut and work with students everywhere from students with developmental disabilities, students with emotional disabilities, English language learners, and then college level psychology and history. And so, across all of those environments and variables, I know the importance of finding materials that are going to engage students. And the first step is obviously getting them to actually interact with the resources in terms of choosing materials. So today I want to discuss ways in which digital approaches to teaching and learning are going to create meaningful academic experiences. So what we're going to do is look at the relevance of technology, the practicality of technology, and then, as I mentioned, engagement with technology. Then we'll take a look at what we have here at Hawks for psychology as well before moving into a general question and answer. I want to start really by having you take a second to reflect, and we really will just take a few seconds here, and reflect on how recent technology has benefited you or benefited your life, your personal life in particular. Obviously, just have a few examples up here that probably ring a bell with some of you. Everything from cochlear implants to keeping in touch with friends and family across the country to getting a ride. We probably, I'm sure you've had this question or this conversation with your friends, with your colleagues, with your family in the last few years. Man, 5 years ago we couldn't have done it this way. So technology, as a human tool, just keeps evolving, and it's something that we are seeing permeate different parts of our lives that we might never even thought they would have. So think about those gadgets used every day. Think about your life outside of teaching. For me, a real obvious one is for any of us old enough to have had to have been frustrated first by maps, but then those printed out MapQuest in directions where you're trying to get to your destination and you've got about 4 or 5 pages and maybe they're stapled, maybe they're not, and you're trying to work your way through that navigation. The fact that things move to a turn by turn. First we had little Garmin units and things like that, but now if you've got something like Apple CarPlay, you can just plug in and it's there. So the difference is phenomenal. Little part of me misses maps, but those can be things we can use on the side. So for many of us, this technology at first, these devices, it felt kind of intimidating, overly complicated when we first tried them out, and now we use them for our benefit. And not only for our benefit, we rely on them regularly. I have that conversation with people sometimes about whether or not they rely on GPS. So they even go anywhere, even in their own city, without relying on it. So we've gotten to the point where these tools have become so ubiquitous that they are very much a part of our lives. So bring this back to the classroom. Teaching today is like teaching any day is not without its challenges, and those challenges seem sometimes to mount, and they definitely evolve as we move with time. But with challenges, of course, come opportunities. So we have students who are often unprepared for the demands of college. This is something that I hear a lot. This is something I hear from instructors and from students, feeling unprepared for the demands of college. There's a rise in the number of non-traditional students. So one version of that is coming back to school after some time away. My mother was one of those students. And they maybe missed out on the tech revolution. They maybe missed out on that period of time. I was maybe one of those lucky people who transitioned into college at a time when we were using microfiche and also using databases, online databases that were pretty new at the time. And the ability to kind of transition and see the connection between those two technologies was important to me in making that connection. But for a lot of people, they miss out on that revolution, and then suddenly they've got this overwhelming set of technologies in front of them that they are struggling to deal with on top of the coursework and on top of being a student. And having said that, some are juggling parenting and work, and sometimes it's part-time, and sometimes school is part or full-time. We have a lot of different moving pieces when it comes to our students. So, and those create opportunities too. A lot of traditional students have grown up inundated with technology. This can sometimes also go back over in the challenge category. Many of you might have had the experience where you expect students who have been inundated since they were 5 with technology to have skills that seem kind of inborn, but they're not, and maybe no one ever taught them. So they have the technology in their hands, but they don't exactly know how to use it. That can be a challenge, but also an opportunity to connect them to your course while teaching them those skills. Non-traditional students can work with something that, if it's intuitive and engaging, it can actually make work easier for them. Current academics and future work skills are going to rely heavily on technology. We know at this point that we were lying to ourselves 20 years ago if we didn't think that technology was going to become an integral part of the workplace. And it's more so, not just with jobs in sectors that are technology heavy, but all sectors seem to be relying on technology more often, and we want to make sure that our students are prepared. And an important thing here is technology doesn't replace you. In my time in the classroom, I would often have colleagues who were, anxious about that technology was attempting, as if it was this sentient being, like the economy, attempting to replace them. And it doesn't do that. Good technology and strong technology and the right technology supports the tool. We often, when we think technology, we immediately think things like, laptops and smartphones and using clicker systems in our lectures, and all of that kind of classroom technology stuff. And we go straight to computers, we go straight to the internet. But when we step back a second, technology has always been, from the wheel and the lever, technology is a tool. So if you step back and you think about it like that, what are the tools that are out there? What are the tools that you're comfortable with, and those that you feel like you want to learn about that you can use to become a more complete or a stronger instructor? So this brings us to the question that what does it look like when technology ensures that the learning experience is student-forward and instructor-friendly, right? One of my favorite things about coming to Hawks has been being able to move from the classroom and affect change in an industry that I think desperately needed to have the goal be student-forward and instructor-friendly. So what does it look like when technology does that? When it's used effectively as a support for your teaching, technology improves classroom experience. And I think we've probably all got some stories on both sides or both columns here. But when it's effective, it really does improve the classroom experience. It allows us to create learning tools that are relevant and practical and engaging for the classroom experience. And if you can be those things for today's student, you're going to find a lot more success than if you're not. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty here, but when we really stop and think about relevancy and meeting students where they are and ensuring that our materials are relevant and if they are timely and they make sense to students, they're going to engage them a lot more. So these things actually kind of work together quite a bit. As educators, you know that psychology is important, right? We're sharper, we're more marketable, the more we practice critical thinking, empirical thinking. And so we know that a lot of the content that we're offering students is incredibly relevant. Psychology, maybe we fool ourselves a little, but we have one of the most relevant fields you can have for a human being. And relevance in 3 particular areas is really what what I want to look at. Relevance and academic success. How is this going to help me be a better student, or how is this going to help me succeed as a student? Relevancy in terms of the ease of updating content. And then, of course, relevancy to what students want to use, or what we really want them to use going forward into the workforce. So academic success, when you think about this today, on most campuses, students rely on technology to accomplish everything they do. The more comfortable they are with that, the more likely they are to be successful. When you realize that they do everything from class registration, they use an LMS, for everything from checking grades, submitting work, to actually participating in things like forums and discussion boards, completing writing assignments, multimodal projects that are mixed modalities. The students they do everything in this kind of technological bubble. So if they're not comfortable with it, then it really can affect student success. And this extends into different ways that we use it in different classrooms, right? Online portfolios and art classes. Obviously, in science and psychology lab, it's just scratching the surface when we look at digital recordings or measurements, and possibly digital interactives. Things that we can't necessarily study right there in the classroom. Practically, we can use technology to take a look at it or simulate it. Business classes and stat classes using Excel, digital graphing and math. We go on and on and on. Data, real-time data from government sites, not just in economics, but in a lot of fields. And then even interactive maps or say virtual reality to tour certain places. I know my history students as well, being able to really almost get their hands on a primary source in its real form was a lot more powerful than just a transcribed printout. And we can update that content so much more easily thanks to the technology we have now. So whether that's updating guidelines, in our syllabi from the APA, whether that is making sure that the people and the places and the current events that we're talking about are relevant and current and timely, or making sure that data is updated and shared and collaborated on in a timely and kind of easy, practical way for students. We can do all of that very easily. It's a lot easier than using a traditional print method. Replacing print materials can be costly and can take a lot of time. With something like courseware, for example, we can update that content very quickly, and we can deploy that content, and you can customize that content very quickly. Overnight, you can make changes to make sure that students have the most timely, the most relevant examples. There's also future skills. This is something that probably feels common sense, but there is some data to back it up. Half of today's jobs are requiring some degree of technology skills. You'd be hard pressed, really, to find a lot of jobs where there's no use of any kind of modern technology. And we're going to see that probably increase to about 77%, almost 80% in the next decade. And then by 2020, 5.8 million more jobs requiring IT skills. So not just using technology, but jobs that are going to be software related. Over half of IT jobs being software related. This is going to create a lot of new businesses. This is a huge engine of change, and we have an ability to make what we're doing relevant with students by weaving in some of the skills that they need. Moving to practicality, let's talk about how online educational platforms can work practically and logically to support student and instructor goals. We want to make sure that it's intuitive and user-friendly. Many of you probably experience frustration, or students have experienced frustration when things aren't user-friendly and intuitive. We want to make sure that the delivery to students and instructors is accessible. We want to make sure that it saves time, and we want to be working smart, not hard here. We want to make sure that there's insight for the instructors, that their gain is actually not just a tool for their students, but a tool for them. First and foremost, technology should not be a barrier to learning. It should be supporting it. It should feel effortless. It should move efficiently and quickly. It should provide access to due dates and grades and assignments. Data that is most relevant and most practical to students should be available using technology, and it should be able to organize that course information in one place, one simple space. Practical functionality promotes independence and ownership, and that's a really important piece of this. We want independent thinking and ownership being promoted over academics. I mean, those are the real goals. We want people to own their learning. We want them to be independent thinkers. We want them to be critical thinkers. And using practical functionality, giving them the tools they need to be independent can kind of encourage that ownership. Students are busy today. Again, we mentioned traditional and non-traditional students. We have some students who are so busy it probably makes our heads spin. We've probably had students come in and let us know what's going on in their lives. And even if it's not some great tragedy or some sob story, it is often mind-blowing what people are juggling to be able to pursue their education. So we want to make sure that online educational platforms are accessible on multiple devices. We want to make sure that the places that they're going, resource centers, libraries, tutoring centers, that they don't have to download anything to ensure that they can log into a program. We want it to be very accessible, that they can use these platforms at any time of day. So a good educational technology is going to offer strong customer and tech support, and this is really important. I know it from my time in the classroom, and I know there are people out there who have had to spend way too much time answering students' questions about how to use the technology and not about the content. You didn't get into this to teach students technology. You got into this to teach students about content and to do what you're good at and to do those things that don't frustrate you. And so a good online educational platform is going to have such strong customer and tech support that your students don't ever have to come to you with those questions. They come to the people who are providing those services. Instructor benefits are incredibly important, and one big one is saving time, right? Why would I use an online educational platform if it's not saving myself and my students' time? Again, if students are busy, instructors are busy. So we want to reach all students through targeted instruction. We want to expose them to those 21st century skills we've kind of hinted at, and we want to have collaborative materials. The ability to differentiate. We can do that a number of different ways, and we want to make our courses incredibly customizable based on differentiation. We want to be able to use diagnostics and say, for psychology and intro to psych, for example, you've got a lot of students coming in who took psych in high school. Maybe they took advanced placement and they didn't pass the exam or didn't take the exam where they were, or maybe they just took your general psych class in high school. They've got a little bit of prior knowledge. It'd be great to take and survey and diagnose the class for its strengths and weaknesses so you know where to spend your time and energy. We also want to make sure that you can collaborate not just with students, and they can collaborate with each other, but you can collaborate with your colleagues. So we want to make it easy to share resources, and in particular, in places where you've got a lot of new instructors, you've got a lot of adjuncts who are maybe not designing course materials and they're kind of being handed to them. We want to make this as easy as possible to package it and save both you and them time. We also want to make sure that you're getting to know your students' habits, that you get the reporting and the analytics that are most important in terms of providing or informing your teaching. So the important thing here is that effective platforms should provide exactly what you need to deepen your insight. You should be getting more out of this than you're putting in. We want to get information you can access on your own. We want to make sure that you can track performance by running reports and getting the kind of reports you need, and to make sure that analytics of individual student performance can be used. So not just looking at performance, looking at time on learning, for example. We want to make sure you've got a student who comes to you and they're struggling so much and they don't know what they can do and they really want to bring this grade up. And we take a look and, well, you spent about 15 minutes all semester in this online platform. What's going on there? So, you know, or the class average is here. So an ability to use that as kind of a tool in those discussions to point the student in the right direction. And more importantly than that kind of gotcha moment with a student is the ability to really look and see where that student struggled in the content. So we want to see their study habits and see how they interact with the platform as well. But again, being able to kind of drill down is so important. And we don't want to make drilling down an incredibly time-consuming process for instructors. This brings us to our last topic, which is engagement. And this word gets thrown around a lot in education, but it means something when it's actually true. And I think we all know that. I'm not sure if you've had the same experience as I have, but it's definitely become a buzzword, and sometimes it gets to the point where the word has no meaning. But we all know engagement when we see it, and we all know that how effective it can be when it's real. And there's a lot of different ways that we can do this. We can engage through play. We'll get into that in a second, but essentially, you've probably heard the term gamification, but making the experience feel more like a game and more like something that we're kind of familiar with in our everyday life outside of academics can be incredibly engaging. Collaboration, I mentioned collaboration between instructors, but also collaboration between students. Online technology, educational technology can provide a lot of opportunities for collaboration. I bet most of you already have ideas running through your head when you hear the word collaboration and technology about how you've used that, everything from online forums and discussion boards to group projects. Adaptive learning is another one that probably feels a little bit like a buzzword, and it can mean different things, I think. So we'll get into that a little bit. And then, of course, visual stimulation. A room full of psychology instructors knows the importance of visual stimulation and knows the importance of visuals for memory, for long-term memory. And so we want to make sure that we are stimulating students and they're not just getting a big block of text put in front of them, because as we all know, they shut right off. Online educational platforms have the capacity to be very playful in their delivery. So you can mix up a lot of different kind of interactives so that students aren't necessarily kind of gaming the question. You can use game-like activities. Ask yourself, with the activities that students have, are they rewarded at the end of the lesson? They're very used to this concept of multiple lives. Video games in our culture have actually made such an impact that I think they made a huge impact on education when it comes to this kind of expectation. And most of us know that it's getting it right, not getting it the first time, that's important. So do students have multiple lives, to complete a lesson like a game? Do they have questions that give them immediate feedback? So when they do something wrong, do they have this kind of tutorial that they're often used to in other parts of their lives? And online interaction can help promote communication. We want a safe space for students to be able to feel comfortable sharing their ideas. The thing I probably took the most pride in my classroom was the environment that I created for people to share and to feel like they were comfortable saying what they needed to say, for asking any kind of questions they had, just making sure that it felt safe and warm and challenging, and knowing they were going to get the challenge that they needed without feeling like they have to run for the hills. And we all know that quiet students don't mean unintelligent students. So collaboration can be incredibly important for those students, and incredibly important for those students who are really excited to collaborate. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Writing and peer review platforms can be incredibly helpful. Peer review was a huge tool in my classroom, and obviously technology provides us a lot of opportunities to do that. Many of you might have used things like Google Docs, but to give and receive advice, writing from different sources. You might have students who know who's reviewing them, who don't. You can go in a lot of different directions, but good educational technology is providing opportunities for that. Discussion forums, they've got their challenges too. Many people, anybody who's ever taken or run an online course knows that you have to be very creative and you have to be a good facilitator to make sure that students are connecting with thoughtful conversations and not just replying for the point. But they can be an incredibly effective way to get students to say things or to speak up when they might not do so in class. Group activities as well. You can run group activities through the same kind of collaboration. One way we do that at Hawks is through chapter projects, for example. We try to make sure that our content has chapter-based projects, and often we try to make those group activities so students are collaborating and not just kind of off on their own. I mentioned adaptive learning. There is no magic formula for reaching all students. We're just all trying to do it the best we can. It's very nuanced. You want to keep students on pace. You want to give them the necessary remediation to those students who need extra help. You don't want to hold those students back who are successful. So diagnostic testing and knowing right where students are and where their prior knowledge is can be so helpful. We want to make sure that homework is targeted to those things that we want students to know and that we know they don't already know. And we also want to make sure that we have the right reports and tools to be able to tweak that. But on top of that, we have the ability now to really adapt to a student. We can see where a student is getting questions wrong, for example. We can not only tell that student why they're wrong, but we can then, if they're getting too much of a certain question type, or objective type incorrect, we can send them back to a set of those with some tutoring, and we can really remediate for that student. We didn't have the ability to do that 10 years ago. And then visual stimulation. A lot of this is pretty common sense. We want to make sure that we're not just providing text and prose. We want to make sure that we're giving students the opportunity to see. They're very used to instructional videos at this point. Infographics are a great medium. Photographs, we want to make sure that our resources have a lot of visual stimulation, images, informative charts. So we, of course, want to introduce students to graphing skills and the ability to form simple tables, but we also want to be able to give them information that can be kind of compiled in a nice and compact and efficient way, in a visually stimulating way that points them right to the important information. So kind of to wrap up here, technology is twofold. It's not only the future, it can prepare them for the future. I hope that we're on the same page there, and I'm excited to hear any questions that you have and thoughts you have on any of this, and have a discussion here. Before we get into that, real quickly, I just want to run through our new Intro to Psych course. The heart of what we create here exists in an online platform, and we believe that the technology benefits we just discussed are reflected in those resources, but that's not to say that we don't also believe in strong print products that can always support your students' needs. We know how important it can be for some students to put pen to paper. We know what it can do, again, for memory. We know what it can do for scaffolding students who are new to a discipline. So I just want to spend just a minute to look at our title. So Hawks Intro to Psychology is complete courseware with a three-step learning path. Learn being the instructional content, practice being a no-stakes environment where the students get tutoring right down to an explanation of errors that they make. You chose this answer, this is wrong because. And when the students move through that, then they move to the certified portion, which is where we take that help away, and that's where they're they're earning credit and they're passing their homework for that lesson. And if they don't do so well, if they lose their lives, they can go back to practice with an adaptive set. We make sure that this is interactive and engaging and stimulating. We make sure that it's customizable and it's relevant and that it's accessible anywhere. We also have a print textbook. And then my pride and joy, the guided notebook. The teacher and me really loved making this. We aligned it with the courseware and the textbook, and it is a pen to paper guide that focuses specifically on something I think is really important in psychology, and that's immediate application of the concepts. Yes, that's what this is. Yes, that's a famous example. This is where the current research is. But here's a question about your own life. Let's apply this right now and lock it in. So, like I said, as important as technology is, I think supporting technology with good print resources is also important. So, thank you very much for listening. We'll go ahead and open it up to your questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Cory. I know we're a little short on time here, but we do have a couple questions coming in, so I want to direct those to you. So Christina asks, how do you accommodate students who have trouble with tech in the classroom when others are ready and waiting?
Oh, wow. Great question. So I think that's something we struggle with a lot. There are, at least half of them tend to be ready and waiting, and we don't want to spend our time, holding them back. But one great thing, if you've got the right platform, I know at Hawk, this is really important to us. We have a whole team of people waiting to do that, so that you don't have to. Obviously, without a platform that does that, it puts you in a bind. It puts you in a place where you've got to spend that time. I think one thing you do is if you are lucky enough, you have a student technology center, or you've got a tutoring center where students can go, or where your educational technology staff is housed on your campus. If you're lucky enough to have that, students can go and get help there as well. But with Hawks, we definitely have resources available that students can call 24/7 to get support, and we'll walk them through it.
Okay, and Joseph asks, what are your favorite apps or websites to actively engage your face-to-face courses? Jason says he's used Padlet in the past, Mentimeter, Clickler cards. What are some of your favorites? And Cory, I thought this could be a good chance to touch on Quizlet.
Yeah, that's great. One of my favorites in the classroom was Kahoot, which started out being, really bold primary colors, and they were kind of in the elementary school, it felt like they were in the elementary school space, but they've really grown, and they've gotten out there into K-12 and then higher ed, and now even the corporate use. Kahoot is definitely a fun one, very gamified, and lots of resources. It's so easy to use for students as well, so I use that a lot. But Quizlet, one of the problems I ran into with Quizlet when I was in the classroom was that it's crowdsourced, and so students would go out and get their own vocab, and they'd study it for, say, especially in psych, and it's so vocab heavy. They'd come back and they'd have studied this, and they didn't know if their definitions or their terms were correct, and they might have anything from spelling and grammar errors to serious major flaws in the definition. And so one way that we dealt with that here is that with our Intro to Psych product, we partnered with Quizlet, and we are a verified creator. So what we did was we created sets for every lesson and every chapter, so that students can, right from the platform, go in and work. We put this actually right at the beginning of every lesson and then in each chapter review. But before they even get into the lesson, to go mess around in Quizlet, there are 7 different game types. So Hawks are not. Quizlet is, they've done a great job moving away from just a straight flashcard resource to a really gamified resource, and students can create their own. They can create them based on diagrams, which is really helpful. We're going to have those as well. Diagramming the eye, parts of the brain, so that students can actually interact with and click on those. So we were really excited about it and dove right in and created the content for our product, and I think it can really be important for your students, or great for your students, but all with the caveat that it's crowdsourced, so make sure you're getting, you know, a verified set.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to our audience for joining in today and participating in the question and answer. And thank you again, Cory. If you do have other questions, you can email them to us at marketing@hawkslearning.com, and we will make sure to get back to you or have Cory get back to you. We will be emailing out a link to view this webinar on demand. And I hope everybody has a great rest of their day.
Thank you.